I was just talking about Hegel's Dialectic, his ideas about history, about reason, and the idea. Um, and I was saying that I wanted to give a little background with that because I wanted people to have a sense of sort of what Hegel's ideas were trying to move towards with this so that we could begin to talk about the role of art and aesthetic theory in Hegel. Well, what I want to do now is I want to begin to introduce a few more concepts that zero in towards that question. And the concepts I want to talk about, I want to talk about culture, I want to talk about spirit, and I want to talk about freedom and perhaps self-consciousness within all of this too. Sort of the central idea in many ways with this. So, we have this event, history, that's cascading rationally and realizing itself as it evolves towards the idea. And in the midst of that, you have human beings with human minds and senses of rationality. And for Hegel, being human isn't just having this DNA, this body, this genetic. Being human is having the capacity to participate rationally in the evolution of history. It's to be conscious, to know what the nature of things are. But as we were just saying, you can't know what things are just by going and experiencing things. If that were the case, this camera that I'm filming on could know what's going on in the world because it's simply responding to it. That's not knowledge, that's not rationality. What allows for there to be some kind of rationality is for there to be a mind, a consciousness that can reflect upon these ratios, this rationality of things, and try to give a vision, a sense, a cognition of what everything is in relation to the whole. I mean, understanding for Hegel has to do with being able to understand things in history. The way we're talking about with history, understand things in history in the sense of this evolving event towards the idea, right? That's what it is. It's being able to see yourself and have a coherent sense of how things fit into a system, this vast cosmic system called reality. Well, there are, as you would probably expect, different degrees, different levels, different ways in which we come to that cognition according to what place we are in history. For instance, when if we talk about an earlier point in history, a point in which more of these contradictions, as it were, these oppositions between concepts are still unresolved. They're still standing there where you think that there's one thing and another thing and another thing. One of the problems that's going to happen with that is you're not going to be in a position to be able to see or to know or to understand all of the possibilities that exist, or even really very many of the possibilities that exist of one thing in relation to others. You see one object and you don't know that it has any connection to other things. You don't know that it has any place in relation to other ideas. And because of that, your sense of what the identity of something is literally less realized. I mean that. Less realized, less made real, it has less connecting it to the totality of all possible things, right? On the other hand, as history proceeds, as these dialectical oppositions, these contradictions, begin to work themselves out and begin to find a way in which to come to be, you end up with a situation for Hegel where you become more and more conscious of the possibilities of things you're talking about. And think about that for a second. I mean, of course, as these oppositions are working their way out, and as you got to imagine sort of this cascading sense of these dialectical oppositions working themselves out like this, right? If you imagine that, and they're making more and more and more and more connections, well, as you come to access any one of these junctures within the dialectic, within this cascade of history that I'm calling about, as it's moving towards the idea, what's going to happen? It's going to mean that you realize more. I mean, this is, I guess, maybe one of an easier way to approach it would be to think about the way something seemed to you as a child, and then think about the way something seems to you as an adult. When you think about it as a child, you probably have tremendous imagination about it. You have all sorts of fancy about it. You have all sorts of ideas about it. But you don't make any sort of cultural associations with it. You don't know what it's going to mean in the history of your life. You don't know what the significance of this is going to be. I don't know, birthdays or Santa Claus, something you really love as a child, but you've got this powerful connection with it, but you don't see all the possibilities of it. You get to be an adult, and what do you see? Well, hopefully you're not too disillusioned by Santa Claus and birthdays. That'd be tragic. But you do see all sorts of possibilities, don't you? You see the sociological connections. You see the political connections. You see the dynamics that work themselves out. You see that these ideas can be filled with sadness as well as happiness in ways that you wouldn't have anticipated. How is that possible? From a Hegelian point of view, it's possible because your consciousness, or maybe even a better way of putting it, the consciousness that is you, has evolved. And it's evolved historically. It's evolved dialectically. It's evolved because you've taken these ideas and thought more about them and come to more of these ideas. Right? Now this is really important because one of the things that it shows about the nature of history and culture and human beings operating within history is that there is in all of this a constant and perpetual struggle to think, to ask a question, to wonder, to savor, to appreciate, to dread, to do any of the mental things we do as individuals or as a community and culture. This is to strive towards what Hegel will call self-consciousness. Self-consciousness. It is struggling towards coming to be fully conscious of what a thing is. Self-consciousness is not self-consciousness in the way that we use the word quite often, like, does my butt look big in these jeans self-consciousness. It's not that kind of self-consciousness. It's consciousness of what it is to be a self, to be a rational being within this historical process. This is the great striving of the individual. This is the great striving of culture for Hegel. And when we realize this self-consciousness, when we have a sense of this thing is not just as it seems concretely, this thing has all of these possibilities, and I see these possibilities unfolding. I see the way in which the possibility of this, of Santa Claus, of my birthday, of the taste of vanilla or chocolate, of the color burgundy, I don't know, anything, any of these things we have a sense of. As we begin to have more and more of a consciousness of this, Hegel refers to this breadth of consciousness when you see this sort of truth inside of it. He calls that spirit. Spirit is important because it is the spiritual dimension of things, the way in which the essence of something seems to supersede its immediate concrete limits when you get this possibility of, oh wow, this can be so much more. That's spirit. I think the place you see spirit quite often is in symbols, right? I mean, a symbol isn't just, it's not just a sign, it's not just something that points to and indicates something. Yeah, it points to something, but in pointing to something, it points to also a reality beyond itself. This is what symbols do. Now, if you're thinking from a Hegelian sense of how do symbols work, the way that a symbol works is that it helps us, a rational being within the dialectic who's striving towards self-consciousness, see spirit. See what I'm saying about all this technical language that he uses? This is the gist of it. It's a way of looking to what something is and going beyond it so that you can see the scope, the overview, the over-truth, if you like, of what its possibilities are. And it's very heady stuff with regard to that, because it puts you in a position where you can begin to see this depth of things. So we got culture, sort of this collection, this attempt, this endeavor, if you, as it were, within history to achieve consciousness, and specifically self-consciousness, thing that we strive towards, recognizing what the identity of us as rational selves in all these other things are and what the connection is between them in the dialectic. We have the sense of spirit, the depth, the purity, the overview, the overtruth that seems to pervade all these things that we're striving towards rationally as the dialectic of history keeps tumbling towards the idea. Finally, one more thing, one more term I want to bring up here in this lecture, and that is freedom. Now, freedom, this is an especially pointed issue for, or concept for Hegel, because I think appropriately, because of the time he's living in historically. Remember, Hegel is a thinker who is on the eve of the French Revolution. He was even unemployed for a little while because of the Napoleonic Wars, and he is the fact that he has to spend time thinking and working through questions about freedom isn't just about trying to figure out how I can do what I want. It has to do with this deep question of what freedom is. So what is freedom? I mean, it ain't free, right? I've seen a lot of bumper stickers like that in this country. But no, if freedom is not simply a matter of being able to do what one wishes. Indeed, what Hegel refers to this as subjective freedom, simply being able to undertake what one's impulses and desires and wants are. And for Hegel, to some extent, this isn't really freedom at all. The capacity that I can go out and do what my impulses would have me do is not freedom. That's just being unobstructed by something. No, freedom has to do with what I was talking about earlier, this idea of self-consciousness. Freedom has to do with the capacity to be what one can be as a rational being within this dialectic. Freedom has to do with being able to come towards and truly realize, make real self-consciousness. It is that capacity that is freedom. That is what Hegel calls objective freedom, the capacity to fully come to be what one is within this dialectical process, to consciously realize the full sets of possibilities that are evolving in history. And so, how does one come to be free? One comes to be free through the evolution of culture. Culture allows us to be free, to be not just to be educated, but to be in a position where we can see all the possibilities of what something is, to be able to see the connections between things, to be able to feel, to sense, to speak, to articulate to all of these different ideas. That, for Hegel, that is freedom. Because that is how self-consciousness, the consciousness that is you within this dialectical process, realizes itself. Right? I mean, I guess you want an example of what that would be like. Here's what it's like. And Hegel's not unique with this. I think certainly the Stoics thought of ideas like this. Buddhism spends an enormous amount of time working through these ideas. But Hegel it works its way very, very significantly into Hegel's thought. Freedom comes when I have the power to use my imagination, not to simply trip the light fantastic, but to imagine things that were beyond even the scope of my own comprehension at a previous point in history. The more that I can span through the real with what my rational capacities of consciousness can imagine, the freer I am, because the more I come to be what I am. The more I participate in these possibilities of the idea, of the thinking of the mind of God, to use Hegel's language, the freer I am. Freedom is objective in that it has to do with the coming to be real of things. So, if I simply go out, I quit my job, I do my own thing, I go off and don't care what anyone thinks about things, am I free? Possibly, but probably not. If I live in a cell somewhere where I'm not allowed to move or act or do all sorts of things, and yet I can contemplate possibilities of all these different aspects of the world. Am I free? There are some limits, but more or less, yes. Freedom has to do with the capacity to imagine, to come to be, rationally, conceptually, in the idea. And it is through art that, as we shall see in the next lecture, this one of the central ways in which it comes to be realized.